back to what's our why? I am passionate about the ability to continue learning and growing and supplement what we have learned, and that we don't stop learning when we complete a designation. How do we continue to grow? And this is meant to be information that you then go into breakout rooms and share with one another. You're thinking of it. We give to each other as we embrace what we're learning and how we bring it into the larger picture. So this is always about sharpening your saw. It's also about when you have a designation with Global IOC, it goes into the Global Coaching Network and you have requirements to continue your learning. And the reason being is there's so much information that we can layer in to what you have learned that we don't want to stop learning. And that's my passion. And for those of you who know me, I'm high theoretic. So of course that fits for me in terms of why we would keep doing what we're doing. There's more to talk about. There's more to learn. And you're learning from not just me, from each other. So I started off by talking about this idea that and what I realized in Sustaining Impact, which is the book that is at press right now and hopefully will be out soon, is that we have to build the scaffolding, the structure for us to embody what it is that we want to live into. Embodiment is living into it. So we first of all have to be aware of it. Then we have to make decisions and behave in that way. And then it becomes, when we talk about habits, that habits are things that we do. When we talked about in the senior program, we talk about unconscious competence. It's unconscious. We do it with competence, and it's part of what we're doing. But it's part of what we do because we live it day to day. So I was talking with someone the other day about, I think it was a salesperson. We were talking about, and this is fascinating for me too, about how people lose their momentum when they have had, they're doing it. This is a top performer who's now average. And he's like, I don't know how I lost it. I don't know what happened. And I said, I do. You stopped doing it. You started doing something else. And that's the difference. We stop doing what we were doing and we start doing something else and we lose our embodiment. And it's fascinating to me because to me, it feels like the way the brain should work is it shouldn't allow that. But what we forget about the brain is as long as a neural pathway is there, it can be reignited. So reignited. So if I've taught myself to stay in the office till 6 o'clock writing, can I teach myself to go lay on the couch until 6 o'clock and binge on Netflix? Of course I can, because I used to do that. Well, not that long, okay, but maybe leave my office at 4 and just go watch TV. So if my momentum is now I'm writing and doing things in my office, but I stop doing it to go watch TV, my neural pathways become re-energized to the old behavior. And that is why we have to stay on top of it. So in Tasha Ehrrich's book on the 7 pillars of insight, we're going to talk about them, but we're talking about them as we build them into awareness of them, behaviors using them, and then a way of life with them. Okay, so her 7 pillars are values, passions, aspiration, fit, patterns. And patterns is a big word because what I just shared with you is all about the patterns in your brain, the reactions and the impact. So when we're working with a client or a team member around values, can the person name their values? And many people they don't think about it. They don't reflect on it. And so how do we help people name their values? Then I have a value. How am I aligning? How am I making choices that align? And then how do I consistently show that that value matters? Okay. I value health. Okay. So I can say health is a value. My daily choices most of the time reflect that. And most of the time, I'm consistently doing that. But there are times when I don't. Okay. So, we have to think about it's not an absolute, but the closer we can get to doing it all the time, it becomes unconscious competence. Okay. So, passions. Do we know what gets us out of bed in the morning? What gets you excited? I woke up this morning thinking, I'm so excited because I get to talk to you all. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart because I see all my old and new friends and people who've been in classes with me, and it energizes me, it excites me. And so, do I devote time and effort? Oh, yeah. When you see the rest of the slides, you'll see what I put for coaching spills over and that you feel the excitement as well. So aspirations, do I know what I want? And in sustaining impact, the first pathway is clarity. Am I clear on what I want? I'm working with an individual right now who says he doesn't know what he wants. And I'm like, okay, what do you think you want? What did you want when you were in college? And like, we have to spend all this time getting into awareness of what he wants. And what's blocking him is he's afraid to want it because he's afraid he can't have it. So we're trying to remove those blocks to wanting it. And then setting, once you know what you want, are your goals aligned with achieving it? Or do you just want it? Okay. Wouldn't we all just want things that drop in our lap? I would. Okay. This whole working embodiment thing, it's hard. It's really hard. So, how do his aspirations shape how he shows up? And how is he living into it? Is he doing the actions to get back to his peak performance that he used to have? And fit. I notice where I thrive and where I feel constrained. When you feel constrained, stop doing it. Find another pathway. If you are constrained, the more you live into constrainment, the more it's going to hold you back. So go align yourself with the environments that bring yourself alive, your strengths and your values, and then actively help create spaces where I can flourish and other people can flourish as well. Patterns, big, big, big. I know it's the fifth one. I would have put it first, but I'm not Tasha. Okay. So the patterns. I know what the repeating cycles are. I understand those are cycles. And when we talk about self-awareness and we talk about leadership, I understand my patterns of leadership and of momentum. I understand my patterns of emotion. This is where we come back to detach from drama. I understand what lights me up and what takes me out of maybe neutrality into agitation. I interrupt unhelpful patterns. That's why we include the pause model in this slide deck, because I stop. The pause model is so powerful because no matter what you're doing, you can do the pause model. And you pause, you acknowledge, you understand what's driving it. So you're recognizing the pattern, and then you are looking at what are the potential shifts. And then you explore what are options for the next time. So we can interrupt patterns. When our patterns are healthy, then we trust who we are. Then our reactions, again, coming back to the drama model, I see triggers and I recognize them. I take myself away. I pause and reflect and choose intentional responses to what is triggering me. And others think of me as steady, grounded, and wise under pressure. Okay, that's the embodiment. They also understand that I'm not that 100%, and that we're not asking anybody to be superhuman here. It's like, how are we living into these spaces? And then impact. I understand how what I say impacts others. Do I understand that? And that's probably when people are asking me, how can I help somebody on my team become more self-aware? Right here. Do I understand that what I say matters? Why do you think we spend the whole time in our classes talking about PEA and NEA? PEA and NEA is simply about how we impact others, and words matter. So then, do I adjust my approach based on understanding that? And my impact is consistently positive purposeful, and aligned with who I aspire to be. Now, remember, I'm not a Pollyanna. We live in a real world, but as much as it can be positive, we want to move into that space. So those are the pillars and then the levels of expression that give us insight. We're working in one of those 7 pillars when we're trying to help somebody on our team or one of our clients become more insightful. So then what happens? Oh, then the blind spots. Oh my gosh, you have to read her book because it's so funny. So they did a survey in a prison about the values people had, and the prisoners in the group, that in the research group, had higher values than the normal population. Okay, when we talk about self-awareness, like, she could not have given a bigger study. The prisoners, when they rated themselves on values, had higher values, including following the law. I'm like, excuse me, I think you're here because you didn't, but they had no awareness of it. And so there's a gap between who we think we are and what we're doing and what others actually experience us. So how do we close that gap? There's an overconfidence in self-knowledge. And what I love about Tasha's book is it has a lot of data in it. And so the geek in me is like, oh, this is so fun. So again, some numbers she has is that when you ask people if they're self-aware, 95% say they're self-aware versus 10 to 15% really being self-aware. We have emotional blind spots that we're going to talk about, and we have hidden patterns that we're going to talk about in just a minute. So let's talk about those self-perceptions, how I see myself and how I actually show up. And we're going to talk about this in just a couple of minutes, about how we have been socialized to the selfies to think that's who we are. And that is our vision of who we are. So a leader who believes they're empowering, but they're micromanaging, and you're working with that person. Self-concept can be inflated or outdated. I may have been somebody 20 years ago that I'm not today. So we sometimes have to dig into that. What does that look like for us? So how do we help self-perception? We've got 360-degree feedback, which we'll talk about after the breakout, and finding somebody that really tells you the truth. That's how we work with that blind spot. Then we have emotional blind spots. And this is where I think people really struggle, is they don't realize that their triggered response is affecting other people. They can't see this. So overreacting in a meeting. I have a client that they have patted the walls of the leader because he yells in his office all the time. So instead of helping this leader not be emotionally hijacked by the situations that are happening, they just pad the walls because they like his ability to produce. I question his ability to lead. Why it matters. Reactivity erodes trust. There's not one person on this call that would raise their hand and say, you know what I really want to do is go into a room where a bunch of people are yelling and emotionally out of control. And that's what showed up in the data on emotional drama. Everybody wants that person to stop it, but they don't have awareness that they're doing it. So this is where we can insert the pause model, do some journaling, do some guidance there. So relational blind spots, how we intend to come across versus how people actually experience us. This brings us back to PEA and NEA. If we don't realize the words that we're saying can really be a challenge for us. I was working with someone yesterday. When I do career coaching, I don't do that much of it, but when I do promotional, I do more promotional coaching. I talk about how that person's coming across. But what I do is I do a recorded Zoom call, and I ask them to go back to the Zoom call and see themselves talking when they're just talking naturally about what they think. And then tell me, is that the way you want to present? If that's who you are and that's how you want to present, then of course we're going to go with that. But the person I was working with was coming across a little sharp and didn't realize that there's some intensity and sharpness to the way she was answering my questions. So a good question for a coach is, what's it like to be on the other side of me? What's it like to be coached by me? What's it like to be led by me? And then finally, we have the systemic blind spots where we don't even realize how homogeneous sometimes things can be, that how identity, privilege, and systemic factors shape the experience that other people have. I wrote a chapter for a textbook that's coming out the end of December on belonging, coaching to belonging at work. And that, you know, systemic blind spots do happen when we exclude people, when we don't see them as equals. And so when we think, oh, I'm fair, so the world's fair, or this organization is fair. So we have to look sometimes at cultural and systemic blind spots as they affect the way we coach and lead, okay? And they perpetuate inequality. Okay, the culture of self. I'm never, what do I want to say about it? I'm always, not never. I'm always in wonderment when I've just talked to someone who hates her husband and she posts on Facebook how much she loves him. I like, seriously? How can you have such a big gap in inauthenticity? But this is what has happened. The vacations we go on, the people, the things we do, what I had for breakfast has to be posted because it's important to you to know what I eat, right? That has become an overuse of technology, but it also amplifies our performance. I just did this, I just did that. When I go out to LinkedIn, all these people just got all these new certificates. And I'm like, okay, yes, we need to celebrate, but what's really going on that you need to know about my performance, okay? And I want to be really clear that I think performance should be celebrated, okay? But celebrated to the extent that it is not inauthentic. So endless validation causes us to be shallow. Our self-worth is what other people think about us, and we end up having to try to build that for people because they're externally validating, and that is creating some real challenges. And so the flawless image over pursuit means we're not really growing, we're pursuing. So the selfie image over insight. So the selfie image is not allowing us to develop insight. We live in a world where we can project our identity. Social media, reels, curation of who we are, likes is validation. Performance replaces who I want to be, who I appear to be, rather who I really am. So what happens in that? Technology. Sherry Turkle is with MIT, so she has some really good books on the selfie world. The digital platforms encourage us because we see other people doing it, so we do it too. The online personas create the illusion that I'm connected because I have 100 people that like that. But are those 100 people that will show up for me when I'm really struggling and I really need help? Probably not. We measure ourselves by applause rather than alignment. How do we help people come back into alignment? And Martha Beck, one of my favorite resources in finding your own true north, talks about the social self that is shaped by expectation and approval. And this is way back before selfies. And the essential self, which is driven by authenticity, values, and identity beneath roles. And so how do we help people bring that back? I love Stelter in 3.0 coaching because he says we start with values. What does the person value? The cult of self amplifies the social self while silencing our authenticity. And how do we help people move away from that? So what are the consequences? Exhaustion, constant on the phone. Okay, constant putting the reels in. I don't even know how to make a reel, so I admit to the technology. Okay, Melissa, maybe you should call me after this class so you can help me, okay? But I don't know how to do that. But the fragmenting, because who are we when we're building bits and pieces of us that goes out to the world that's fragmented? And the shallow validation, there's the meaning. And meaning is important to people. It really, really is. And the loss of clarity. Who am I really? So likes confuse my authentic self. Would people like me if I was my authentic self? That's a big question. So how do we break free from all of what I just shared? We shift from what am I curating to who do I want to be? Who do I want to become? It's, we're getting close to the end of the year, at the beginning of the year. What do I want from myself this year and why? What do I value and how do I align that? Practices like reflection and journaling for internal awareness. It's funny, I was teaching the senior class yesterday, and I was talking about the module where we talk about the 7 levels of reflection. And of course, one of the questions was, how long do I have to do this? And so because you know why? They're busy people and it takes time. Okay. And so, how do we build reflection into what we do and how we do it? Feedback and coaching for external awareness. And then, how do we anchor people in their values, their passions, and their aspirations to reclaim the essential self? And we go back up to that slide that says we integrate these 7 pillars into our insight. Now, enough of me. This is more of you. And I am going to do this. I'm going to put it in chat. But I want you to talk about how you, when you listen to a client or team member, how do you recognize those pillars? And how do you recognize blind spots? And how do you help them have the conversation then to talk about those blind spots? How have you done that in the past? And then how can you spot when a client's in their social self, constructing who they want to be, who they want to show up, how they want people to see them versus seeing themselves. So you're going to do one of those 2 questions, and because I'm on it, I'm not going to forget. I'm going to put them in chat. Any questions before you go to your breakouts? Okay, here you go. Into your breakout rooms you shall go. Okay, I'm just doing 3, so there's a couple of rooms with 4. I'm looking at all your groups and I'm jealous. Okay. I want to be in every single one of them, hearing what you're saying. Who felt like you were being ripped out of that room to come back because you had one more thing to say? Right, Kyle? Right, Abby? Yeah, see, there was one more thing to be said. So tell me what you talked about. So, Diana, are you saying we need more breakout time from now on? Okay, who wants to share? You can tell on somebody in your group. Come on, Abby, bring it. I know you wanted to.
I mean, I'm a talker, so you know. Um, so we were really focusing on the question two, as far as spotting the social self versus the essential self. And I like, so we were sharing some experience that but I want to point out something that uh I Ina, sorry, our colleague from South Africa shared, is that uh in some in her experiences, one of the things that she kind of catches on is when the employee will um look to seek approval, but they've already kind of done something, yet they're still asking for some kind of affirmation, on what they did, because they're kind of projecting something onto that the scenario. We're talking about projects and things like that, but I thought that was really interesting because that is kind of true too. And then Kyle kind of touched on that a little bit too in a different light, but as far as folks who are in a sense faking it to make it kind of thing, and not being their true self, and kind of projecting this image of themselves that they like to be, but not necessarily aligning to where they're at, or what their actions are saying. I hope I capture that.
That is so true. And there is like that's a fine line between fake it till you make it and being your true self, right? So you do have to stretch, okay, but we're not stretching to the extreme. We're stretching a little bit. And we do want approval. If the like I started with the high eyes in the room, okay, we want a little bit of approval, but how we go about getting that really determines then how there's experience as well. Another group, what did you talk about? Marcella, thank you.
Um, just double mute. I'm sorry. Good morning, everyone. From our group, we focus more on the first question, and really helping, others. For example, identifying blind spots and how do you coach to the 7 pillars. And something that we were discussing was, I think, asking self-discovery questions, because a lot of times people may say, oh, I want this promotion or I want this, but really helping them identify what are the things that they really value, right? Is this something that you really want to do? So asking self-discovery questions. And Diana in our group gave a great example. She mentioned that she's been working with a client that really values DEI. However, it's almost excluding, the other group, right? So you're focusing so much in a specific group. And sorry, Diana, please, feel free to chime in if I didn't capture that correctly. But it's almost you're excluding others, and then helping them understand it's almost like a blind spot for this person, right? You really feel that you're advocating for the cause, but yet you're excluding others. So how do we make sure that all the pillars align, and almost taking them through all the pillars? And then Sapna had a great point too about, it feels like because we're so in the cult of self, right? A lot of times we're almost losing the values, and it's something that we see in our new society.
That's awesome. And that's so true. But a couple of things that you brought out, those pillars, and I'll send you that slide so you can look at the pillars and think about how you can coach to the pillars, because I think they're really important as far as the insights we need to have about ourselves. But more importantly, the cult of self then becomes overlaid in this. And I don't see, I might say I see myself in those pillars, but I'm really not. So, how do we bring it back? And how do we coach using discovery questions? And so, I think Marcella should get bonus points for finishing our senior program and telling us something from the program. I always love that, something that we bring forward. Okay, I'm going back to the slides. The third group can talk after the next breakout, I promise you. And weren't you like so impressed how I was able to bring that into chat? You're like, oh my God, she got it. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what does it mean to have internal self-awareness? Okay, we've been talking about it. I have clarity about my values, passions, and aspirations and triggers. Okay. I'm aware of what I'm thinking, how I'm acting, and how my behavior creates patterns. Okay. Recognizing the why I'm choosing something. What's behind the why? And do I act on what I believe, or are those separate? How are my actions aligned with what I believe? And the emotional literacy. I recognize my emotions. They are data, not directive. Just because I'm ticked off doesn't mean you need to know I'm ticked off. It means I'm ticked off and I have to decide what I want to do with that. And that we have a growth orientation, a balanced view of our strengths and limits. That's why when we do strict strength finders work, we don't try to help somebody be better when it's their 34th strength. We think about how they balance that strength or lack thereof, and what does it look like to have it a little bit integrated, but we don't get good at that. So what does it look like in leaders? Decisions are anchored in values, and the team understands that the decisions are about values. There's an authentic voice versus polished performance. We all know when somebody is just performing. And it's not fun and it doesn't feel good to us as followers. The leader recognizes the blind spots without defensiveness. I think the thing about maturity is that we can say, yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that. Yeah, I do that too. Okay. It's what I'm working on, but I'm a work in progress. We are all works in progress. So it's okay to be working on something. Does the leader pause to respond rather than react on autopilot? And remember, this is so much about how we're wired, and so much of that brain is just acting the way it's supposed to, because it's supposed to go down neural pathways and do these things until we do pattern interrupts. And does our leader model resilience by learning from mistakes? And is it okay to make mistakes? Of course, it's okay to make mistakes. And how do they model that resilience? So then we look at what are the myths and truths about internal self-awareness. I love this part of her book because she talks about introspection creating self-awareness and not rumination. We can't constantly be thinking about something and not call it rumination. So what do I want to do with the awareness, and how can I leave it alone once I've made the decision? That we don't have to do constant self-analysis. We get to the truth and clarity by noticing patterns. That's the work we're doing right now when we are sustaining impact. We're understanding the patterns, we're noticing the patterns, we're understanding where they come from, and we're looking at solutions to not simply acting from patterns. Self-awareness is fixed. No, it's a skill. You can grow through practice and feedback. So that is something that we can integrate into our practices. How do we help people practice and receive feedback on the new behaviors they're working on? The truth is that we have to focus on the what, not the why. So we're not judging it, we're focusing on what. Now, I would say we have to talk about where it comes from. In the pause model, we're understanding where it comes from. Small narrative matters, the story you tell. You hear that all the time, whether you're in a coaching program or whether we're talking about detached from drama, or whether we're talking about sustaining impact. The story we tell matters. Small habits compound. So James Clear, BJ Fogg, Wendy Wood, Jeremy Dean all talk about baby steps. What's the one step you can do and keep doing till you go to the next step, and build the scaffolding of little small steps that take us where you want to go? And again, emotions are data. So internal self-awareness tools that you might introduce with your group, with your team, or with your clients. Journaling. I love journaling. Now, one of the things that Tasha talks about is there's a thing called overjournaling. So does that kind of lead to rumination, or is it something we're doing a couple times a week? Maybe we do it every day in small bites, because that realigns our values, our patterns, and where we want to go. Again, I don't have to talk about the pause model, but we can integrate the pause model as a self-awareness tool, because the third step is understanding what's really going on. Mindfulness practices. What I love about Tasha's book is this is not about meditation. Mindfulness practice is awareness. What am I aware of right now? What are you thinking right now? What are you aware of? And then how can you take that awareness into a new behavior? Mindfulness practices can happen in a lot of non-meditative ways: walking, being outside in nature. It doesn't have to be simply a meditation practice. It's mindfulness, and it's all about awareness. The narrative awareness: what's the story I'm telling myself about this? And usually the story comes from the meaning we make about what's happening. So check in with what's happening and what is the story I'm telling. Does it start with "I'll never," "they never," something that says an extreme version of what's happening? Notice where you hold emotions in the body. And do you want to hold those emotions and how they show up? Because the emotions are a trigger. But if you stuff them, they're going to wait till they're open, and then it's going to be a big mess. So, knowing where they are and knowing what you're going to do with them when they are in the body. And then values clarification, helping people surface their values. What are their core values? So what are some other lenses we can use? Mental contrasting after the journaling and reflecting. Um, what I love about mental contrasting is, what's your future compared with today? I also like, she has an exercise in here called zoom in and zoom out. So zoom into what's happening and zoom out. And I think if you remember the work of decisive, will this matter in 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days, 10 weeks? When we zoom out, that's what creates mental contrasting. And then do a strengths journal. What is really helping me develop my strengths, and how am I working with the strengths? The other thing that she talks about that I have done a lot, use a lot with clients, is to take an 8.5 sheet of paper, turn it on its side, draw a line down the middle, and talk about the high points and the low points in the career or in their life for the last week, for the last month, for the last year. And now we start to see patterns. And that's another way of creating self-awareness around patterns. And then narrative awareness, surface and talk to ourselves about what those stories we are telling. I use this question a lot. Is that the story you want to live into? And a lot of times clients will be, well, it's not a story. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure it is. That's the story you're telling me. And then the somatic check-ins. Somebody messed with my slides. I'm going on. Here we go. So expand the use of internal tools. Okay. So frame each tool that you're using as an experiment, not a prescription. So when you're working with clients, here's, like you just heard, 5 or 6 tools that you can use with team members or with clients. And it's just an idea to experiment with. It's not a prescription. Pair tools with reflection and debrief their reflections when you're working with them rather. What did you discover about yourself? And then balance depth with accessibility. Where is the person? What are they willing to work on? How deep can they go? Is it shallow, or can they actually go deep? And then obviously, how are people integrating? The integration, using the tools to connect with awareness. So let's talk about some external self-awareness tools. What I love about her framing is that we can look in a mirror or we can look through a prism. When we look through a prism, we all learned this in 7th grade biology or science, that light that goes through a prism brings a bunch of different colors in. So how do we look at our life in terms of a prism, and how I'm experienced? And what does that look like? Okay, so now you're going to hear about my hot button. Okay. 360-degree feedback. I am somewhat biased. I don't know. Vessel would tell you that I'm 100% biased. We have to be super, super careful with 360s, okay? Because the advantages are they do give us information from peers, directs, and reports and supervisors. They can increase self-awareness and highlight maybe a blind spot. They could improve relationships. They could support development plans. They could reduce bias and they could encourage accountability. However, we have to be super careful with how much data that we collect, and we have to be really aware of biases. So when I always think about when we're doing 360s and we have a C evaluating an I, okay, come on. There's going to be some things in there that are really about personalities. When we have an economic evaluating an altruistic, the same thing is going to happen. So we have to make sure that the way the questions are worded, that they can eliminate some of that personality and value bias about meaning making. Meaning making is really hard to eliminate. So we have to be really careful because once the person receives the information, it could lead to defensiveness. We have to consider the expense of having a number of people do the rating. And some comments could just be personal, lacking actionability. So we have to be very, very careful, and trust has to be anonymous. When she talks about it, she talks about a hybrid. So we do the 360, but we also we go a little bit deeper to find out what's really showing up on those 360s. Have stakeholders. I encourage all of my clients to have a board of directors, that you have somebody you can go to that is a stakeholder of you and say, what do I do that helps you most? What do I do that gets in your way? And what do you wish I did more of? Now, what I will tell you is, I say this comment all the time, is leaders are not candy stores, and you cannot be everything to everyone. But you can find some themes and say, what do you like best about what's going on, and what gets in your way? And it's really hard because she talks about loving critics and critical lovers. Okay. And so a lot of times, the people that love us don't want to tell us, but they can give us some pieces that will help us move forward. Real-time feedback loops. After a meeting or a presentation, what went well? What would you change? Align with the immediate impact that you want, and create continuous learning circles. This is for the leaders you're working with. So what they can also do for external self-awareness tools is the perception impact journaling. We capture our intention versus the outcome. What did I want to have happen? Did I think it happened? What am I aware of any patterns that happened while I was delivering the presentation? What's my digital footprint? What's my tone, my language, my style? How does my story online tell a story about me? How does it align with presence and values? And then we have the external. Bring a coach in. For those of us that have external clients, you have to go observe your teams. It gives them an external lens. It surfaces nonverbal impact, and it's a reality. You all are being trained as coaches. For those of you that are in organizations, use your coaching skills to bring an observation to your team. Team norming exercises when a team gets done. Make the implicit norms explicit. I love norming because we start forming. Then when we get to norming, we start those things like we bring phones into meetings. Is that okay? Not okay. We come late to meetings. Is that okay? Not okay. So what are the norms we want for our teams? So then we do perform. How do we clarify alignments and expectations? And how do we give feedback when it's a system level within our team? And from mirror to prism, not one reflection, but many. Stakeholders see different angles, and insight emerges from the collective reality. And so if we're asking the question of How do we help bring awareness to the people who don't have it? The last half of this session was talking about those tools we can use to integrate. And I'll give you these slides for those of you that attended today, so you can take the information and then act upon it. But before we wrap up, I was going to do a breakout, but we don't have time. That my apologies. Some of the resources I used for this presentation: Tasha Urich's book, Insight. Sherry Turkle, she's done a lot on technology and the Selfie. Susan David, always in my back pocket, about emotional agility. I love David Brooks in his Road to Character, where he talks about the embodiment of values. I'm going to be using some of his work when we talk next week about leading across differences, where we talk about meaning and how it's made and how we lead with differences. Of course, Boyatzis, one of my favorite on resonant leadership. And for you want to go deeper into the iGen things that we talked about today, Jean Twenge, really good book. It goes a lot into narcissism, so it might not be something. I always say, when I say authors, go to YouTube, listen to them, hear what they have to say. Don't read the book, go there to see what's going on and how they're talking. And then Martha Beck. So quickly, a couple of upcoming events. The webinars are always at 11 a.m. Eastern. We have Leading Across Differences coming up on November 5th. And on December 3rd, I'm going to talk the first pillar of sustaining impact, which is building the foundation as we go into 2026, about how we can be more successful. We have Detached from Drama Masterclass coming up on October 22nd. Sustaining Impact coming up on the 23rd as a masterclass, 90 minutes, just a touch of what we're talking about with these two aspects. And then November 5th and 6th, we'll start the 4-week program for Detached from Drama on the 5th, and the Sustaining Impact program on November 6th. We have about 2 minutes. Do we have any questions? Is there anything you'd like to know? Anything you want to add? Nothing was triggered? Okay, quickly then. Somebody give me a takeaway. What are you taking away from today? Vessel, what are you taking away?
In our group, we talked about that first question. And it really, when it comes to the patterns and the reactions, where you really see and what people really believe and value and wish for their lives. So that was an important thing for me.
Awesome. Anybody else want to share something?
I'm going to take away the pillars, all of them, taking every one of them away with me, because I like how, if you begin, we talked in our group about going through the pillars and, asking the reflective questions, how you can get to the heart of what's going on with your client. I got a lot of takeaways, but I don't have enough time to tell you all of them. So that's why I didn't say anything. But I think the pillars is a really good gestalt for us to use in our practice.
The pillars are a great framework. You can ask them in so many ways. You can build it into the way you communicate with clients. It's a good way to do a foundational reset with someone in terms of how they see themselves and how they want to build upon that. So I appreciate your time. I'll get the deck out to all of you who are on the call. And please reach out if you have any questions, especially Diana Jones-Ritter, because I need to talk to her, because I haven't talked to her for a really long time. So have a really good rest of your week. Reach out if you have any needs, any questions. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciate you attending the call, participating with each other, and what you give to Global IOC and the community. So thank you very much. It's good to see you all. Keep coaching. Bye-bye.